obviously, most of you are here. You know Lee well, author of 11 novels, 3 short story collections, the great memoir Dime Store, which I just loved as well. I would be remiss as a bookseller not to mention, you can buy all these books, particularly Blue Marlin, at scuppernongbooks.com. Just jump on our website there and order Lee's great new book. $15.95. How about that? From Blair, which we're really thrilled that Lee and Blair are together for this book. I just want to mention one more thing. We have our next event is with Casey Sepp on May 16th at 7 p.m., which would have been an actual big Billy Collins event at Greensboro Bound. But we're going to have Casey do a Zoom event on the 16th. Casey is the author of Furious Hours, which is this great nonfiction about Harper Lee's next book and this murderous pastor in Alabama. And do you know it, Lee? Have you seen this book yet?
I have not. I'm dying to read it because I'm just a Harper Lee freak. Yeah, I have not read it yet.
Yeah, I'll send it to you. All right, so without further ado, let's just all virtually welcome Lee Smith to Greensboro Bound Zoom event.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. You're on.
Thank you. Okay, should I just start talking?
Well, yeah.
Or how do you?
Well, I guess I'll give you one question to open with. How about that?
All right.
This is about your life in writing along with Blue Marlin. And I'm just wondering, in these times, can you write right now? Is it too overwhelming? Can you concentrate?
No, I can write.
Yeah.
I can write. And it's a great relief to me to do that because I think we are all, from time to time really overwhelmed, really puzzled. I mean, it's hard to see the end of this or understand, very much about it. And so for me, writing has always been that. It's always been something that like another country that I can just go into and I can still go there. And so I'm writing, of course, a short novel. And I have a little more time to do it than some other times. And it's a huge relief to me to be there, to be able to do it. And it's a very absorbing kind of a story.
Yeah.
And so I can write and I can also read. And I've talked to a lot of people who are having trouble concentrating reading. And I think maybe I'm having a little trouble concentrating with reading too, of some things anyway. But so yeah, I am able to write. And I'm also, I think it's very important for all of us, most of us, to be writing about what's going on. I mean, not only escaping into fiction, which is my great hiding place in Wonderland, but to be taking notes on what's happening in our actual day and how we feel and what's going on, because, this is unprecedented. This is something that nobody has gone through before, and we are right in the middle of it. And what happens to you is important. You need to and it's also a good time, I think, because we do have a little more time, maybe without our day jobs or whatever, to simply write about our lives. Or, write about that year that you were in the Peace Corps in 1966, and write about, if you're an older person, you're always meant to write some stuff down for your grandchildren. Do it. Think about these things. This is Mother's Day, and you are so important, and this is happening to you. I have to say, we all, I think, need to be thinking like this.
Yeah. You talk about you have to witness these times, and that I really love the poet Carolyn Forche, who always writes as a poet of witness.
Yes.
Yeah, and but Blue Marlin is actually witnessing your life, right?
It is, and in a sense, it's in a very strong sense, Blue Marlin itself is an escape from these particular times because it's set in 1958. So, back to the 50s. It's set in mostly Key West. Again, it's a road trip. It's a road trip that if you read it, it'll take you back to 1958, Key West at that time and place. And so it's a kind of an escape reading, I think, for this moment. And that's not a bad thing. as I say, because we can escape and then we can always come back. But we come back a little, you know, a little fresher maybe. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's, I mean, it's also a story about mothers for sure.
It really is a story about mothers. Yeah. And it's and we didn't think about it being a book for Mother's Day,
No.
you know, specifically, but it really is a story about mothers. And I'm thinking about this a whole lot. I just came from my granddaughters where we all had a socially distanced lunch, like we sat in little tables like planets, you know, around the backyard, the whole family. So look, this is my grandchildren.
Yay.
These little girls, they're so cute. And so I am thinking about mothers. And this book, Blue Marlin, is in large part about my mother, but it's about a whole little nuclear family. Shall I tell them the plot?
Yeah, I think so.
Or a little bit.
Don't give too much. Yeah.
Okay, but no, it's extremely dear to my heart. I'm so glad to be talking about it on Mother's Day because it's about my mother and my father and me, a nervous little nuclear family who in 1958 took a road trip together to Key West because both my parents had been hospitalized in different mental institutions during that year. I'd been farmed out to relatives, wonderful cousins, got lots of them. But Daddy'd been at Silver Hill, Connecticut. Mama had been at UVA Hospital in Charlottesville. And then they were getting back together. But there was something wrong about that, which I didn't quite understand at the time. I think they'd just been so, you know, they'd been parted for so long. So Daddy said that things were not going well. So Daddy's psychiatrist, who was not only a brilliant psychiatrist, but just a very intuitive person, gave Daddy 2 prescriptions. The first prescription was, of course, lithium, the drug of choice for that day and time for what they called then manic depression. The second prescription was for a geographical cure. And that meant that our whole family should go somewhere on a trip, get out of our regular lives in Grundy, Virginia, where he ran his dime store, and take a big trip together and get to know each other again as a family. So Daddy picked Key West because he had been in the Navy in the Second World War, and he'd been stationed in Key West on a destroyer, and he loved it. So he picked Key West. So we get in this big fishtail Buick, and we head for Key West, which took a long time in 1958. And they're not hardly speaking. I mean, things were a little, I don't know still what it was, but maybe, I don't know. But anyway, they were not even speaking. My mother would say things, and they're both smoking like Liz, so that our whole car looked like an aquarium, you know, filled with blue smoke on the way down. So there we go. And every now and then my mother would say, Lee, would you please tell your daddy I need some more cigarettes, even though he's sitting next to her. So things were not great. All the way down, they were not great. They're barely speaking, and I'm thinking, oh my God. And it was like the marriage, like another passenger was sitting next to me in the back seat, you know, not doing too well. So anyway, we get there, we go into, and Key West, I've never seen anything like it. You know, you drive in, it's pink, it's wild, it's flowers, it's people yelling and hollering and, you know, playing music in the street. So we drive into the motel that he's arranged to stay in. It's named Blue Marlin, and it looks exactly like this. This is the sign for Blue Marlin. It's still there. You can stay there right now. But anyway, we drive into the Blue Marlin. Daddy stays a long time inside, and he comes out and he says, girls, you're not going to believe this. And we say, what? And he said, we have some rooms. We have 2 rooms here. We are the only people who are normal, regular people here. The whole rest of this motel is currently occupied by the cast and crew of a movie that they are filming, and will be filming in Key West for the next month. And Lee, I've had to promise that you will not bother the actors or actresses or anyone. Now, do you think you can? I was a sort of tomboy, bothersome child. And they said, what do you think? And Mama and I said, what stars? Who's here? Because we read movie magazines cover to cover all the time, and we knew everything. We had a subscription to the National Enquirer. So, okay. And Daddy said, well, he said, let's see. There's Tony Curtis, Dina Merrill, Cary Grant, and my mother and I just went, ah, like this. And so we were completely thrilled, and we checked in, and that's what happens in the book. What happened is what really happened in the book. And although in the book, I changed things a little bit because, I mean, what really happened, I'll tell you what, like stuff like this happened, like every night at 7 o'clock, because they didn't have phones in the rooms then, it's 58. Tony Curtis would call Janet Leigh in Hollywood from a public phone in the lobby. And my mama and I would sit on a settee like this right in front of it, in front of some ferns. And then we could hear everything Tony Curtis said to Janet Leigh. And he would talk and talk and talk. And then at the end, he would say, God bless you, my darling. And my mother and I would just rattle their newspapers that we were hiding behind like this and think, oh my God. So things got better and better as we stayed. And eventually the marriage got reignited, and Mama started wearing a red hibiscus in her hair. And eventually we were all in the movie. And this is all true. And it's all in the book. Well, what is fiction, though? What is fiction is that the little girl is a lot like me, I guess, this bothersome child. But what's fiction is really my parents, my own parents, as I say. You know, they've been in hospitals. But I needed something else, I thought, for fiction. Because what you do when you write fiction, I think, is I've always felt like I can tell the truth in fiction better than nonfiction. Because, you know, the real world is inconvenient. I mean, things don't always work out in the way a story needs to work out. And sometimes they're inexplicable. So I changed some things. And what I changed is the parents. In Blue Marlin, the parents have been prescribed the geographical cure by a psychiatrist because the marriage is breaking up, because daddy's had an affair. This did not happen, but it happens in the book, and it kind of, you know, as I say, it ups the ante. It sort of raises the stakes and puts a whole element in there that wasn't in there. So this is the difference, but many of the events in here are the same. And so for me, it was like writing about a wonderful episode from my childhood, but it was very satisfying too to be able to, you know, to work with it as fiction. And so that's what I did here. This is not really my mama's, not really my daddy.
Yeah. How did you hold on to this story for so long? I mean, this story is so rich with so many different things going on.
I wrote an earlier, shorter something. I mean, you know, I took, you know, because really Key West at that time, it was, you know, Key West at that time, it was right before the Cuban Revolution. This is 58. 59 was when it all changed. But we could go to Havana from a boat at the end of Duval Street in Key West and gamble all night, which is something my daddy was really good at. And, you know, so there were things we did. But anyway, it's a very colorful place. And I've gone back ever since that trip. I've probably made 20 or 30 trips back to Key West. So that's just one of my places too. And I'm a writer to whom place means a whole lot, and it means a whole lot in a story, as it does here. I mean, I've written mostly about the mountains. I think that's how people identify me. But this place is a very particular place, and it's very important to this story, I think.
Yeah, I love that about the book. You know, you feel so set in Key West, and it feels so good. Hey, there's the character in the novel is a little writer, right? She has her notebook everywhere. She's a spy, right?
She's a spy. Well, can I read one paragraph?
Yeah, please.
This is where she's a spy. Okay. Yeah. Well, that was kind of me. Wait. Let me just find her here. She's where is she? Oh, here she is. She says, well, I can't quite find where she's a spy, but she is, she goes around, I can't find that paragraph, but anyway, she's a spy. She goes around with her paragraph with her little notebook all the time, takes notes on all the neighbors in the neighborhood. And this is when she's still in Virginia before they even go to Key West. Once she gets to Key West, she continues to do the same thing. And that is, I guess, the kind of, maybe the kind of writer child that I was, I guess. Let's see, where is it? I'm still looking for that. Oh, here it is. Okay. And this is before she even gets to Key West. She and her best friend. And I was kind of like this. We lived to spy. And this is mainly what we did on our bike trips around town. We'd seen some, and we had a spy agency, of course. We'd seen some really neat stuff too. For instance, we had seen Roger Ainsley, the coolest guy in our school, squeezing pimples in his bathroom mirror. We had seen Mr. Bondurant whip his son Earl with a belt, and later, when Earl suddenly dropped out of school in the Army, we alone knew why. We had seen our 4th grade teacher, prissy Miss Emily Horn, necking on a couch with her boyfriend and smoking cigarettes. Best of all, we had seen Mrs. Cecil Hertz come running past a picture window wearing nothing but an apron, followed shortly by Mr. Cecil Hertz himself, wearing nothing at all and carrying a spatula. It was amazing how careless people were about drawing their drapes and pulling their shades down. It was amazing what you could see, especially if you were an athletic and enterprising girl such as myself. I wrote my observations down in a Davy Crockett spiral notebook I'd bought for this purpose. I wrote down everything: date, time, weather, physical descriptions, my reaction. I would use all this stuff later in my novels. And obviously I have. And I was that kind of a child, although I have to say, what you do when you write fiction is you up the ante. And she's a little more obstreperous and more daring and more confused probably than I was, as I say, to get the shape of a novel. And I wrote at the end, I wrote a little essay here about the difference between writing fiction and writing nonfiction. I think because I know that memoir is the genre of our time right now, but I've always felt I could write fiction better, the truth better in fiction. And so there's something about that and about the difference between the two forms. But when we were talking about a life in books, I was very lucky to get to put my own life somewhat in this book. But I think also every writer grows up with a life in books. I mean, that's why you want to write. You have things that you read and that you love. And so it pleases me a lot to be talking about this in your bookstore, and for us all to be thinking together about the books that mean so much to us and meant so much to us, as children. They kind of put us along that way. Because there's two things I think that make us a writer. One thing is experiences that you have in your own life. And I had the wonderful experience of growing up in a real storytelling family deep in the Appalachian Mountains in Grundy, Virginia, and growing up around storytellers and around narrative all the time. So it's what happens to you is important, the situation you're born into. And I was real lucky to have that. But then I was also really lucky to have parents, particularly my mother, who encouraged me to read. And I'm thinking about that on Mother's Day, having just visited with my own little granddaughters who are reading up a storm right now while they're not in school. And I think that's something that's really important. What happens to you in your life, and also what you read. What do you read that sends you on this path? So,
hey Lee, I'm going to jump back real quick to a memoir, because I've always felt this about Dime Store, Lee's memoir from a few years ago, that I can't think of another memoir that talks less about the writer than yours. Like your memoir is about everyone else still.
It's about everybody and every book and everything that made me a writer.
Yeah.
I think everything, everybody, everything I read, everything that influenced me including Eudora Welty coming to my class when I was a freshman in English at Highlands College in 1960, 1965, something like that. 64, 65, yeah. And it's all that. It's of course, I had a big reaction to all of the things and all of the people that I'm talking about. But I don't know, is that true? I haven't ever thought about the memoir like that. I guess it is, though. It is.
I think it might be, yeah.
It's about everything that has meant a whole lot to me.
Yeah.
Rather than just me. I'm much less interesting than all these other things and people, let me tell you.
Yeah.
So.
I don't think that's the way most people look at memoir. But the book is lovely for that reason. It becomes a very generous book, I think.
Well, I think each memoir is different. And of course, each memoir does depend upon the person's life. And a number of people, who are writing memoir are doing so because they really have something. They want to change the world, or they really want to change something, or they really want to say what happened to them because they think it is important and must be told. It has a larger context, a greater meaning, and there are things that they want to say and do. And I feel like that I have been able, though, to talk about and write about a lot of those things, those kinds of things that have meant so much to me personally in my novels. I mean, like, I've been so interested always in writing about women and women's lives, and particularly the lives of women who did not have the kind of opportunity, say, in the mountains where I grew up, to maybe go on, didn't have a school teacher mother, didn't go on to college, but, women who had way too little schooling and way too many children and no chances of a change and so on. And yet these were people that I knew in lives that I loved and appreciated. And so, I've tried to make statements. Right now I'm writing a little bit about trafficking, actually, in this novel I'm writing. And I try to make, make statements in my work, as well as, support publicly the things I believe in. But I didn't go into writing with one burning cause to speak of. You know what I mean? I loved books. I love a story. I just love a story.
Yeah.
Nothing is satisfying as a story.
Hey, Lee, I want to jump in and let people know, if you have questions for Lee, you can type them into the chat here, and then I can read them to Lee. There just are too many participants, I think, to open it up. It would just be a cacophony of people shouting at you. So there will be questions for you coming up, Lee. Yes.
Sure. That is fine. Any question? I'm
going to just end with one more for myself. And when you bring up the idea of women's fiction, do you still feel like there's a thing that women's fiction is forced into still? You know what I mean? Like, that there's still like these preconceptions and even stereotypes about women's fiction that, even in 2020 still exist, I think. And
I know what you're talking about, Brian, but I wouldn't say that quite so much. I think women's fiction, when you say it like that, is derogatory, of course.
Right.
And it's a kind of a put down. And I think perhaps what you're thinking of is a book like romance fiction, or even, that kind of thing that's gonna, we know how it's gonna, it's predictable. It's like taking a trip with an old friend. You enjoy the journey, you know where you're going. Some kinds of historical fiction are like that too, et cetera, et cetera. Some types of mystery fiction, of course, are like that too. But I don't think people think anymore really in terms of, or I don't think anymore in terms of, among serious fiction, I don't think this is serious women's fiction and this is serious men's fiction. I don't make any delineation. And I really don't think anybody does. I mean, there are so many, particularly among the younger, the younger writers, young women writing, I mean, there's no difference, I'm telling you. Of course, they don't, I mean, in terms of subject, there are, of course, things that women know more about and things that men know more about, sort of, sometimes. Yeah. I give you that. But no difference.
I guess, as a bookseller, I know that there are men who just only buy books by men, even still,
Yeah.
It's frustrating. But luckily,
Yeah.
women by
But
weight.
I think they're older men. I think those
Yeah,
are the older
probably.
men. I swear.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're probably right. All right, let's get to the people. Our first one is yes, the classic. What advice do you have on writers?
Wait a minute. I missed the first part of what you just said.
What advice do you have for would-be writers? Is the first question.
Read.
Yeah.
read until you find something until you find the kinds of books that you wish you'd written, you feel like you could have written, and then see how they're put together. There's a book, who wrote that book? Named Read Like a Writer. Okay, there is such a book.
Francine Prose, maybe?
Yeah. And that's a wonderful book because it helps you, I think, if you see a book that you wish you'd written, take it apart, put it back together, see how it's written, and think of how you would do, how you could do that. And read, and make sure you know what you want to write, what kind of book you want to write, and just start doing it. I think it's, I met this young woman the other day who told me she was going to be a writer, and she'd already started. I said, "What are you working on?" She said, "Well, she said, I'm making my platform." And I said, "What? You're what?" And she said, "Well, I'm getting on all the different kinds of social media, so I'll have the platform for when my book comes out." And I said, "Have you written your book?" And she said, "Well, no, she hadn't written her book yet." So I would say, forget your platform. I didn't even know what a platform was. I'm thinking a platform. But then, so, okay, don't have a platform. Read the best fiction you can. Find some other people that are interested in this kind of thing too. I mean, a writing group is good, or some kind of a writer's workshop or something, mainly because of those reading lists. I did not know what I did not know until I got into, writing classes at Hollins College when I was a young woman. So read and just start writing and get some readers. It's a transaction. You can't be a writer without a reader.
Okay, next up. What are you reading right now, and what's on deck? What do you have? What's in your bedside stack of books to read?
Oh my gosh! This is funny. You won't believe it. No, I'm just reading Willa Cather again.
Yeah.
I just read My Antonia, knockout. And so I find in this particular time, maybe I need comfort or something, like we all do. But to go back to some of these, I've got Carson McCullers, I think, is next in my stack, which is not to say that there are not a number of wonderful young writers. This Asian writer Jean Kwok, I just read her recent novel that just came out, and a lot of different things. But right now it's My Antonia.
Nice. How lucky. Yeah. All right, folks. So go ahead and type your questions in, and we will get them to Lee. So Lee, do you feel like right now the book you're working on is COVID in that book at all?
No.
No, not at all.
No, it's not. It takes me a long time to digest, I think, an experience enough to be able to write about it. I have very rarely written about things at the moment they happened. I went down the Mississippi River on a raft, one time when I was young, and 30 years later I wrote the book. And it just kind of, things have to gestate, and it takes me a while to get there.
This next question is apropos then. What activities outside of reading feed your writing best? Things like gardening or walking, other things?
Actually, those two things. Yeah, I just planted 2 rose bushes, and then I had to cover them up last night. No, I'm gardening like crazy during this time, and I love to garden. I walk 3 miles every day, and I don't go on a track, and I don't have a little outfit. I just walk all over town, and I talk to people, sort of all over town. And then I'm always writing and reading and cooking. I love to cook. And unfortunately, I'm cooking a little too much right now. but I like, like everybody,
Oh,
like
yeah.
everybody.
Yeah.
But I love it. So those are just, those are my kinds of activities, and hanging out with people, which I can't do from such a remove,
That's tough. Yeah.
as this. So.
All right, the next one is you talk about how important Key West is in this book and place in general in your writing. Can you talk about that more? I assume it is more than setting. The way you describe it, the place is like writing a character.
Yes, it is. And I think so often the place determines the character. Place, to me, place is it just tells us everything. And I'm a writer who's so tied to place that I have to draw big scale things of, like, the neighborhood where my characters live, or the town, or the whatever, and then I have to draw the rooms. I have to draw the houses. I have the whole walls of my office covered with these great big kinds of drawings, because I don't know, it tells me everything. I have to know the whole place before I can let my character be there and see her or see him go through his or her life. It's really important. And I think place really is important to the characters too, because the place where you live and the circumstances under which you live and so on, that determines so much of who you are. It determines how you speak. It determines how you think. A lot of times it determines what your possibilities are. I mean, the mountains that I've written about a whole lot in the earlier part of the of this century, that determined everything: who your family was, where you lived, how you lived, etc., etc. And of course, also we use place to set mood, to set the mood of our characters and of our scenes and the places. You've got to give the reader enough so that the reader can really be there in the world of your fiction. So if you think about the 5 senses, I think is a good way to think about it. You've got to give the reader a place to be, that's not in their own heads or their own lives. And we do it, I think, oddly enough, reading is through the senses. You got to give the reader something to see, something to feel, something to hear, every one of the smells. Sometimes all of these are important. And in that way, and setting is very important with that, and in doing that. And in that way, we create a reality for our characters, and we create a reality for the reader. We give the reader a world, another world to go into, and that's what they want. They don't want to just be in their chair. They want to be in your world while they're reading your book, and you got to give it to them and to let them have a place to see and move and have their being and smell and touch. I think that's what we want.
Now there's some amazing advice for a young writer, right there. That was amazing. Hey, another place question though. What about your physical place that you're writing at? How much does that affect what's going on? Do you have just one place that you're writing?
I write all over town. And I always have. I'm still writing. Yeah, I have to confess, I'm still writing longhand. I'm still writing longhand. I'm still writing on yellow legal pads. Wow. So I can do this anywhere. I was writing in the cemetery yesterday, actually, at the Episcopal Church Cemetery over here. It's so beautiful. And I'm just sitting over there and writing some stuff, and it's just, I can do it I guess we can all do it anywhere, but it means a lot to me. And I don't know, I think so much of my work has to do with the voice of my characters, and it seems like it's really physical or something to me, and therefore I don't know, if I write it longhand, I feel like it's more them, it's more physical or something. By the time I'm typing, I might be deadening them. I don't know, I want to hear I want their real voice to be, I want to touch the page with it. I want it to come out of my body. You know what I mean? I can't quite describe. But anyway, that's why I'm still doing it. And then of course in my many drafts, I will be typing. I will be on my computer, but I gotta have it longhand first.
So great. Here's a classic question. Do you know what's going to happen to your characters when you begin?
Well, that's where writers differ. so radically, because I know I have very good friends who almost start with a blank page, and they're going to let the characters, they have some ideas and they're going to see what happens. They're going to let the characters talk to them and tell them what's going to happen. And, you know, and we all know wonderful writers who begin like that. And I'm just always, clearly it's a great way to begin these. They end up with wonderful pieces of work. But for me, I need to, well, I need to have the place in mind. As I say, I need to draw it. So I'll have a place to move around in. I need to do a whole lot of what I consider pre-writing. And to me, that's as important as the writing. That is the drawing of the places and the writing down every single thing about your characters, every single thing in the world from the time they were born till the time that your story starts. So you'll know exactly who you're dealing with there. And so I do a whole lot of that, and I do tend to plan the story all the way through. Just for one reason, so I know I'll have a good chance of finishing it, because I think, you know, I just have this horror that I believe that, you know, the dresser drawers of America are filled with half-finished novels that we'll never get to read, and they might have been wonderful if we could have read them, but everybody got to a certain point and said, ah, you know, and just threw their hands up and, you know, went to France. I mean, you know, whatever. And so I just think, you know, I think we want to give ourselves as good a chance as we possibly can. And so I do, you know, it's not anything like an outline, but it's pages and pages of stuff that I think is going to happen before I really start writing it. And I think that gives me a better chance of finishing it. So still, of course, you can get in the middle and think, big mistake. But I think it gives you a much better chance of finishing it. So that's kind of what I do.
Yeah. Lee, do you miss doing a book tour?
Yeah, you know, because writing is actually a lonely process. I mean, you're just there in your room, you're by yourself, you got a lot of characters, but you don't have any other people. And when you think about writing, it, you know, it is a two-way transaction. I mean, the writer presupposes a reader, and it's just so nice when you can make that come together. It's so nice when you can talk to the readers and, you know, shake the readers' hands, talk to the readers. I don't know. It means a whole lot. I mean, I'm a merchant's daughter, I guess, and it just means a whole lot to me to talk to people, see what they got out of the book, see what else they're reading, what they're thinking. You know, that part, I really miss that part.
Lee, you'd be an amazing bookseller if you need another career.
Well, no, I'm a merchant's daughter. You know, I grew up working at a dime store, so I'm serious about that.
Yeah. So we're hitting the 45-minute mark, which is what we promised that we would take of Lee's day. I know we all have more mimosas to drink, you know. But I do
Are you guys drinking mimosas in the bookstore? Oh, no. I'll have to come over there.
Yeah. Hey, can I finish with a, you know, sort of classic New York Times question?
Sure.
Who are you inviting to your dinner party? Give me three writers you're inviting to your dinner party.
3 writers I'm inviting to my dinner party. Oh my gosh. Let's see. I think I am. Who am I inviting? I'm inviting. I think I'm inviting. Let's see. I'm inviting Ron Rash to my dinner party. And I'm inviting to this particular dinner party. And can I invite dead people?
Yeah, oh yeah, please.
I can write. Okay. I'm inviting Ron Rash to my dinner party. I think I'm going to invite Alice Munro to my dinner party. I think I'm thinking about a short story dinner party in particular. And I'm going to invite Ron Rash. I'm going to invite Alice Munro, and I'm going to invite Flannery O'Connor.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah.
Wouldn't you like to see Ron Rash and Flannery O'Connor together?
Yes.
Yeah. And these are all people to whom place is so important too, you know. I can't quite get away from place. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. I know we would all be clapping wildly right now, Lee, if you could hear us. So thank you so much for your time this afternoon on Mother's
Oh,
Day.
thank you.
Let's
Thank
all
you.
make sure Blue Marlin. It's fairly short. You can read it pretty quickly.
You can. That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
But it's really just a lovely, lovely.
And it's a length I love. I love that novella.
Me
That
too.
novella
It's
length.
my favorite.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mothers and Strangers. If you still need a Mother's Day present, go ahead and
Yes.
pick that up. And Lee, thank you so much. Any last words for everyone? Or
Well, let's all keep reading and keep believing and taking long walks and write some stuff too. It's a good thing.